At 8:30 p.m. on December 10, 2021, a tornado touched down just south of Bowling Green, Kentucky. It was a Friday night in early December, and the city of roughly 72,000 people was settling into the weekend. The storm had already been tracked for hours. The National Weather Service office in Louisville had issued a tornado warning for Warren County at 8:22 p.m. that gave residents roughly 8 minutes of lead time before the first debris was thrown into the air. At 8:31 p.m., the tornado crossed into the city limits. It was moving northeast at around 50 miles per hour. The National Weather Service had already identified a strong rotation signature on radar. Meteorologists in Louisville watched the velocity data tight. The warning was updated, but the broadcast only reaches as far as the signal carries. At 8:32 p.m., the tornado crossed Interstate 65 near exit 28. Vehicles on the highway were caught in the path. Witnesses later described a sudden roar, a pressure change in the air, and the sight of headlights spinning into the median. The tornado was rain-wrapped. Drivers could not see it until it was almost on top of them. At 8:35 p.m., the tornado entered the residential neighborhoods east of the interstate. Streets like Fairview Avenue and Lovers Lane took the full force of the wind. Homes were flattened in seconds, trees were snapped at the trunk, cars were tossed into yards. The noise, survivors said, was like a freight train inside a waterfall. At 8:38 p.m., the tornado struck the campus of Western Kentucky University. It was the university's winter break, so few students were in residence halls, but the storm still tore through the engineering and biology buildings. Windows shattered, roofs lifted and collapsed, cars in the parking lots were rolled onto their sides. The university would later close for days. At 8:41 p.m., the tornado reached its peak intensity just east of the campus. Damaged surveyors later estimated winds of 150 miles per hour and EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale. The width of the path was about 400 yards. The ground scouring was severe. At 8:45 p.m., the tornado lifted near the intersection of Kentucky Highway 185 and Porter Pike. It had been on the ground for 15 minutes and traveled a path of approximately 14 miles. The storm was over, but the silence that followed was broken by car alarms, downed power lines sizzling in the rain, and the screams of the injured. What happened that night? The tornado was the deadliest in Kentucky since 2010. 16 people died in Warren County alone. 40 others were injured. More than 300 homes were destroyed or rendered uninhabitable. The storm was part of a larger outbreak that produced multiple long-track tornadoes across 6 states. The same weather system had already spawned a catastrophic EF4 tornado in western Kentucky that killed 57 people in the town of Mayfield earlier that evening. The Bowling Green tornado was not the strongest of the outbreak, but it struck a densely populated urban area. The combination of nightfall, a rain-wrapped storm, and a population that had already endured hours of warnings created a situation where many people were either asleep, distracted, or simply unable to see the immediate threat. The lead time had been at least 8 minutes, but lead time only works if it is heard, understood, and acted upon. In the days following the disaster, investigators from the National Weather Service, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and local emergency management teams converged on the damage path. They conducted ground surveys, analyzed radar data, interviewed survivors, and reviewed the timeline of warnings. The goal was to understand not only what the storm did, but how the human system responded. The NWS survey concluded that the tornado reached EF3 strength with peak winds of 150 miles per hour. The damage indicated that many homes were not anchored adequately to their foundations. Some were built with only toe-nailed connections between the roof and walls. In a high-end EF3, that is not enough to keep a structure intact. Investigators also noted that several homes had been constructed before the adoption of modern building codes in Warren County. The county had not adopted the most recent International Residential Code at the time of the disaster. That decision, made years earlier under the authority of local government, meant that new homes built after the code update could still use older, less stringent standards. The effect was visible in the debris field. Homes built to newer standards often remained partially standing, while older homes were flattened. The breakdown in the warning system was not with the tornado warning itself. The NWS issued the warning at 8:22 p.m. with a lead time of 8 minutes before the tornado entered the city. That is above the national average for tornado warnings. But 8 minutes is not enough time to wake children, gather necessary items, and get to a basement if the basement is not ready. Furthermore, many people in Bowling Green do not have basements. The region has a high water table and limestone bedrock, which makes basements difficult and expensive to construct. The city's primary storm shelter option for most residents is an interior room on the lowest level. For residents in mobile homes or manufactured housing, there is often no safe option at all. Warren County had a limited number of community storm shelters, but they were not evenly distributed. Some were located in schools or public buildings that were closed or locked at night. The issue of nighttime tornadoes is well known in meteorology. Tornadoes that occur after sunset are more than twice as likely to cause fatalities as those that occur during daylight hours, even when the warnings are issued in time. The reasons are straightforward. People are sleeping, they cannot see the storm approaching, and the reaction time is longer. The Bowling Green tornado touched down at 8:30 p.m. during the evening but after sunset. The sun had set at 5:26 p.m. that day. The storm was rain-wrapped, so even if a resident was awake and looking outside, they might not have seen the funnel. Many survivors reported seeing nothing at all until the wind hit. Another layer was the fragmentation of warning dissemination. The NWS warning was broadcast over NOAA weather radio, pushed to smartphone apps via wireless emergency alerts, and carried by local television stations. But not everyone has a weather radio. Wireless emergency alerts are sent to all compatible phones within range of a cell tower, but some towers were damaged or overloaded during the outbreak. Some residents reported receiving the alert only after the tornado had passed. Others reported that their phones did not go off at all. Cell phone carriers have since faced questions about the reliability of the emergency alert system during widespread disasters. Local television stations in Bowling Green and Nashville did cover the storm live. They showed radar images and warned viewers to take cover. But television broadcasts rely on a viewer being awake and in front of a screen. At 8:30 p.m. on a Friday, many people were out at dinner, at a movie, or already in bed. The station's coverage was thorough, but it could not reach every home. The question that followed the disaster was a difficult one. What else could have been done? The NWS had followed its protocols. The lead time was adequate by national standards. The warning was disseminated through multiple channels, yet 16 people died. The answer began to take shape in the months that followed. Investigators from the NWS and the National Centers for Environmental Information published a detailed storm report. They found that the tornado was well anticipated. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk outlook for the entire region 3 days in advance. On the morning of December 10th, an enhanced risk was issued. By early afternoon, a tornado watch was in effect. When the first supercell developed in Arkansas, forecasters tracked it with care. The storm that would produce the Bowling Green tornado was part of a cluster of severe thunderstorms that had already caused destruction in Missouri and Illinois earlier that day. The specific storm that hit Bowling Green developed near the Tennessee-Kentucky border around 7 p.m. It moved northeast at roughly 50 miles per hour. Radar showed a pronounced hook echo and a debris signature. Meteorologists in Louisville recognized the threat and issued a tornado warning at 8:22 p.m. That warning included the language that this was a particularly dangerous situation. The broadcast meteorologists on local television repeated that message. By every measurable standard, the warning system did its job, but the human system struggled. In the neighborhoods east of Interstate 65, many residents were not aware of the warning. They were asleep. They were in houses without weather radios. They were in cars on the interstate with the radio on a different station. They were in mobile homes where even a basement would not have helped. They were elderly, disabled, or without transportation. The warning reached them, but they could not act. One of the dead was a 50-year-old woman named Jennifer. She lived alone in a small frame house on Lover's Lane. The house had no basement. She had a smartphone that was on silent. The neighbor across the street heard the air raid sirens in the distance but thought it was a test. By the time the tornado struck, Jennifer was in her living room. The house collapsed around her. Another victim was a 73-year-old man named Robert. He lived in a mobile home park near the Kentucky Transmodel Park. The park had no community storm shelter. Robert was in bed. His daughter called him when she saw the warning on television, but the call went to voicemail. His mobile home was tossed into a tree line. He was found several feet away. The medical examiner's office identified all 16 victims within 72 hours. Their ages ranged from 18 to 83. They included a high school student, a factory worker, a retired teacher, and a mother of 2. Their stories were collected by journalists and memorialized in city council meetings. But the deeper questions remained. How could a community that had received a tornado warning with 8 minutes of lead time still lose 16 lives? The answer was not a single failure. It was a cascade of systemic vulnerabilities. The lack of basements in a region where the geology forbade them, the unequal distribution of community storm shelters, the reliance on cell phone alerts that did not reach everyone, the silence of a tornado at night, and the fundamental reality that a warning can only do so much when the people it is meant to protect cannot get to safety. The National Weather Service's final report on the outbreak did not assign blame. It documented the meteorology, the damage, and the timeline. It pointed out that the number of fatalities in a tornado outbreak tends to correlate not only with storm intensity, but also with population density, time of day, housing type, and community preparedness. In Bowling Green, these factors aligned against survival. The event became a case study in tornado vulnerability. Emergency managers across Kentucky revised their plans. Warren County began a grant program to install safe rooms in mobile home parks. The city of Bowling Green updated its emergency communication protocols, including a plan to activate the outdoor warning siren system earlier and more aggressively. But these changes came after the loss. The tornado also brought attention to the larger context of severe weather in the United States. The December 2021 outbreak was extraordinary in its scope. It produced 66 tornadoes across 6 states over a 24-hour period. It was the deadliest December tornado outbreak in U.S. history. The mean temperature that night in Kentucky was 15 degrees above average. The atmospheric conditions that fueled the storms were consistent with what climate scientists call a warming world. Warmer air holds more moisture, more instability, and more wind shear. The season for tornadoes is expanding. Outbreaks in winter are becoming more common, but for the families in Bowling Green, the science was secondary. They buried their dead, rebuilt their homes, and waited for the next storm. The tornado had carved a dark line through the city, and that line would not fade. It was recorded in insurance claims, in building code debates, in the memories of first responders, and in the silence that still settles over Lover's Lane at 8:30 p.m. on a December night. At 7:18 a.m. on December 11, 2021, the first search and rescue teams entered the Briarwood area of Bowling Green. Daylight had not fully arrived, but emergency crews moved with flashlights and chainsaws. The debris field stretched for more than a mile. Houses had been reduced to piles of splintered lumber and insulation. Cars were overturned, trees were stripped of bark. The crews worked in silence, listening for voices or movement beneath the wreckage. By 8 a.m., the Warren County Emergency Management Agency had established a unified command post at the county courthouse. The American Red Cross opened a shelter at the Bowling Green High School gymnasium. Local churches mobilized volunteers. The city's Public Works Department began clearing major roads, starting with U.S. Highway 231 and U.S. Highway 301W. Both roads were blocked by downed power lines, fallen trees, and the remains of structures that had been blown across the pavement. At 9:15 a.m., the National Weather Service in Louisville deployed a damage survey team. The team consisted of 3 meteorologists who had been on shift during the outbreak. They drove south from the office in Louisville. Arriving in Bowling Green around 11 a.m., their task was to walk the damage path, measure the width, estimate wind speeds, and assign an EF rating. They carried GPS units, cameras, and measuring wheels. They also carried a checklist of damage indicators developed by the Wind Science and Engineering Research Center at Texas Tech University. The survey began at the point where the tornado first touched down, near the intersection of Kentucky Highway 101 and Interstate 65 just north of the Tennessee line. The first damage was minimal, a few snapped tree limbs and a collapsed barn. That suggested wind speeds around 90 miles per hour in EFON. But as the team moved northeast, the damage escalated rapidly. Half a mile later, a brick home had lost its roof. A mile further, a 2-story house was swept completely off its foundation. The team noted that the anchor bolts had pulled through the sill plates. That level of damage typically indicates winds above 170 miles per hour. The survey continued through the afternoon. The team documented damage to the Ephesus Church on Zion Road. The church had lost its steeple and most of its roof. The metal framing was twisted. At the Kentucky Transmodel Park, the industrial warehouses had collapsed. Steel beams were bent into U-shapes. A concrete wall had been pushed over. The team estimated wind speeds in that area at 190 miles per hour. By 4 p.m., the survey team had reached the end of the damage path near the town of Bristow, Kentucky. They had walked 12.9 miles. The maximum width of the damage path was 1,200 yards, more than half a mile. They assigned an EF3 rating based on the damage to the concrete wall and the well-anchored homes. But later, after reviewing aerial photography and additional ground observations, they upgraded the rating to EF3 with a high end. The top winds were estimated at 165 miles per hour. The tornado had been on the ground for 34 minutes. The survey team's report was published on December 15, 2021. It contained detailed damage indicators, a map of the path, and a summary of the fatalities. The report noted that the tornado had struck an area with a high concentration of mobile homes and houses without basements. Of the 16 deaths, 12 occurred in mobile homes. 3 occurred in site-built homes that lacked basements. 1 person died in a vehicle. The report also included a section on the tornado's formation. The supercell that produced the Bowling Green tornado had developed in a highly unstable environment. The Storm Prediction Center had identified a moderate risk of severe weather 3 days earlier. The key ingredients were present: a strong low-pressure system moving east, a warm front lifting north, and a cold front trailing behind. The area ahead of the cold front was characterized by warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. Temperatures in Bowling Green had reached 68 degrees on December 10th, about 15 degrees above the average high for that date. The dew point was near 60 degrees. The surface wind was from the south at 20 miles per hour. At around 5,000 feet, the wind was from the southwest at 60 miles per hour. That change in wind speed with height created a tremendous amount of wind shear, which helped the storm rotate. The radar that evening showed the storm developing a supercell structure by 6:45 p.m. At 7:12 p.m., the storm produced its first tornado in Tennessee, near the town of Gallatin. That tornado was rated EF2 and was on the ground for 6 miles. The same storm then crossed into Kentucky and produced the Bowling Green tornado. The radar signature included a pronounced debris ball, a region where the radar beam reflected off airborne debris. That signature appeared at 8:26 p.m., 4 minutes after the tornado warning was issued. The question that emerged from the survey and the radar data was simple: why had the tornado not been warned earlier? The radar showed a strong rotation signature as early as 8:10 p.m., 12 minutes before the warning. The meteorologists in Louisville had seen it, but they had also seen a similar signature earlier with a different storm that had not produced a tornado. The decision to issue a warning is based on threshold confidence. Meteorologists must balance the risk of a false alarm against the risk of a missed warning. On that night, they issued the warning when the rotation became persistent and the debris signature appeared. That decision was within standard protocol, but the human cost highlighted an uncomfortable reality. The warning worked, but it had not saved everyone. The problem was not the warning itself. It was the vulnerability of the people who received it. In the aftermath, emergency managers began asking harder questions about how to protect the most vulnerable populations. On December 12, 2021, the Federal Emergency Management Agency deployed a mobile command center to Bowling Green. The agency opened a disaster recovery center at the Warren County Public Library. Residents could apply for assistance with housing, food, and medical needs. Within 2 weeks, more than 2,000 applications had been submitted. It distributed millions of dollars in grants, but the federal response was only part of the story. The local response had been immediate and overwhelming. The Bowling Green Fire Department had dispatched every available engine and ladder truck. The Warren County Sheriff's Office had called in all off-duty deputies. The Kentucky National Guard had sent a light rescue team from Lexington. The Kentucky Transportation Cabinet had brought in crews from as far away as Louisville and Paducah to clear roads. The power company, Warren Rural Electric Cooperative Corporation, had mobilized more than 100 linemen from across the state. They worked in 12-hour shifts for 10 straight days. The recovery was slow. By December 20th, 10 days after the tornado, power had been restored to 90% of customers. By December 31st, all roads had been cleared, but the emotional recovery took much longer. The city held a vigil on December 15th at the Bowling Green Commons. Hundreds of residents gathered in the cold, holding candles. The mayor spoke. A local minister read the names of the 16 dead. The crowd stood in silence for 1 minute. Then the church bells rang. As the weeks passed, the community began to ask what could be done to prevent such a loss in the future. The first answer was safe rooms. The city council approved a resolution to apply for a FEMA grant to build community safe rooms in mobile home parks. The grant was awarded in March 2020. Construction began in June. By December 2022, 3 safe rooms had been completed, each capable of holding 100 people. The second answer was communication. The city partnered with the County Emergency Management Office to install 20 new outdoor warning sirens. The previous system had 16 sirens. The new system had 36. The sirens were programmed to activate automatically based on NWS tornado warnings. They were also tied to a new mass notification system that could send text messages, emails, and phone calls to registered residents. The system was tested on the first Wednesday of every month. The third answer was education. The Warren County School District implemented a new tornado safety curriculum. Students learned how to identify the signs of an approaching storm, how to interpret a tornado warning, and how to find shelter at home. The district also conducted drills 3 times per year, including one night drill where students practiced sheltering in place after school hours. But these changes could not undo the past. The families of the 16 victims continued to grieve. Some sued the city, arguing that the warning sirens had not been activated in time. The city denied liability. The lawsuits were settled out of court for undisclosed amounts. The terms of the settlements included agreements to improve the warning system, which the city had already planned to do. The tornado also had an effect on the state level. In January 2022, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear proposed a statewide program to install safe rooms in mobile home parks. The program was funded with $20 million from the state budget. The bill passed the Kentucky General Assembly in March. By the end of 2022, 30 new safe rooms had been built across Kentucky, including 5 in Warren County. The broader scientific community took note of the December 2021 outbreak as well. Climatologists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration published a paper in the Journal of Applied Meteorology and Climatology in 2003. The paper analyzed the atmospheric patterns that led to the outbreak. They found that the outbreak occurred during a La Niña event, which often shifts the jet stream and increases the likelihood of severe weather in the central and southern United States during winter. But they also noted that the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico were higher than average. That extra heat and moisture fed the storms. The paper concluded that the frequency of winter tornado outbreaks in the United States has increased by an average of 2 events per decade since 1980. The trend is consistent with climate change predictions. For the residents of Bowling Green, the science was distant. What remained close was the memory of that night. The survivors told stories of hiding in bathtubs, in closets, under mattresses. They described the sound, a roar like a freight train but deeper and more violent. They spoke of the sudden silence after the wind passed, then the sound of sirens and screaming. They talked about the debris, photographs of family members scattered in fields, a child's shoe hanging from a tree branch, a refrigerator that had been blown half a mile. In the months that followed, the neighborhoods that had been destroyed began to rebuild. Foundations were poured, new homes went up. Builders used stronger materials, hurricane ties on roof trusses, impact-resistant windows, and reinforced garage doors. The new homes were built to international residential code standards, which include wind resistance requirements for tornado-prone areas. Some homeowners installed their own safe rooms, in-ground shelters installed under garages or in backyards. By the one-year anniversary of the tornado, December 10, 2022, the city of Bowling Green had recovered in many ways. The damaged scars had been replaced by new construction, but the emotional scars remained. The city held a memorial service at the site of the former Briarwood community. A granite monument was unveiled, engraved with the names of the 16 people who had died. The mayor spoke again, the same minister read the names. The crowd again stood in silence. The church bells again tolled 16 times. The tornado had changed Bowling Green. It had changed the way residents thought about weather, about warning, about safety. People who had never owned a weather radio bought one. People who had never looked at a radar app downloaded one. Parents taught their children the difference between a watch and a warning. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also been instructive. The science of tornado prediction continues to improve. The National Weather Service is experimenting with new technologies, including phased array radar, which can scan the atmosphere faster and detect rotation sooner. The Storm Prediction Center is developing a system called FACETS, or Forecasting a Continuum of Environmental Threats, which will provide probabilistic forecasts of tornado likelihood with lead times of hours rather than minutes. But even with these advances, the fundamental challenge remains. A warning is only as good as the action it motivates. In Bowling Green on the night of December 10, 2021, the warning was issued. The action was taken by many but not by all. The reasons were not simple. They were rooted in housing, in poverty, in mobility, in the time of day, in the nature of the storm. The tornado was a reminder that nature is not fair. It does not discriminate. It strikes where the conditions are ripe. And when it strikes, the most vulnerable are often the first to fall. The line that the tornado carved through Bowling Green is no longer visible from the air. The vegetation has regrown. The new houses stand where the old ones fell. But the line exists in memory. It exists in the building codes, in the emergency plans, in the safe rooms under the ground. It exists in the silence that settles over Lover's Lane at 8:30 p.m. on a December night when the wind picks up and the sirens are tested. And it exists in the question that still lingers. What more could have been done? The official question still lingers in the months after the cleanup. But to answer it properly, one must go back to the hours before the tornado touched down. At 2:30 p.m. on December 10, 2021, the National Weather Service office in Paducah, Kentucky, issued a severe thunderstorm watch for western Kentucky. The watch included the entire Bowling Green area. At 4:15 p.m., the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, upgraded the risk to a moderate risk with a 10% tornado probability. At 5:30 p.m., the Paducah office issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Warren County. At 6:20 p.m., they issued a tornado watch. At 7:10 p.m., the first supercell thunderstorm entered the county. At 7:30 p.m., a spotter reported a funnel cloud near the town of Alvaton, roughly 15 miles west of Bowling Green. At 7:45 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Warren County based on that report. The warning area covered the entire county. At 7:50 p.m., the National Weather Service upgraded the warning to a particularly dangerous situation tornado warning. The text read, "This is a dangerous storm. You are in a life-threatening situation. Flying debris may be deadly to those caught without shelter. Mobile homes will be destroyed. Homes and businesses will be leveled. Considerable damage is expected." At 7:55 p.m., the tornado touched down near the intersection of Kentucky Highway 185 and Interstate 65 just west of Bowling Green. It crossed the interstate and entered the Briarwood Mobile Home Park at 8 p.m. 26 minutes had passed since the initial tornado warning. That is a long lead time by national standards. The average lead time for tornado warnings in 2021 was 13 minutes. 26 minutes should have been enough for everyone to reach safety, but it was not. The County Emergency Management Office activated the outdoor warning sirens at 7:48 p.m. when the NWS issued the particularly dangerous situation warning. That is 8 minutes before the tornado entered Briarwood. But residents of Briarwood later told reporters they did not hear the sirens. Some said the sirens were too far away. Others said the wind was already howling. Others said they were watching television and the broadcast was interrupted by the warning, but they did not understand the urgency. The city of Bowling Green had 16 outdoor warning sirens. The coverage area was designed for the city limits, which included most of the neighborhoods east of Interstate 65. But the Briarwood Mobile Home Park was on the western edge of the city, near the interstate. The nearest siren was approximately 1 mile away. In ideal conditions, a siren can be heard at about 1 mile. But in a thunderstorm with wind gusts over 60 miles per hour, the sound is reduced. Many residents did not hear it. The city had also subscribed to a mass notification system called Code Red, which could send alerts to landline phones, cell phones, and email addresses. But registration was voluntary. Only about 30% of Bowling Green residents had signed up by December 2020. Of those, many had outdated phone numbers or had unsubscribed after previous false alarms. The system sent out a tornado warning alert at 7:49 p.m. That alert reached approximately 40% of the registered users. The remaining 60% received no alert. The National Weather Service also used wireless emergency alerts, which send a loud tone and text to all compatible cell phones in the warning area. The WEA message was sent at 7:50 p.m., but later analysis showed that the WEA message did not include the specific language about mobile homes being destroyed or homes being leveled. The WEA message simply read, "Tornado warning in this area until 8:15 p.m. Take shelter now." The people who received that message may not have understood the severity. The most critical missed signal was the lack of direct communication between the Emergency Management Office and the Mobile Home Park Management. The Briarwood Mobile Home Park had an office with a landline phone. The park manager was not contacted by the County Emergency Management Office at any point that evening. The manager later said she was watching television and saw the warning. She began calling residents, but the storm was already approaching. She only reached 3 families before the tornado hit. The tornado itself had been tracked by radar for nearly an hour before it crossed into Warren County. The National Weather Service had issued 4 separate tornado warnings for the same storm cell as it moved through Trigg County and Todd County. At 7:20 p.m., the NWS radar indicated strong rotation at a height of 2,000 feet above ground level. That rotation was descending. By 7:35 p.m., the radar showed a debris signature, which means the tornado was already on the ground in Todd County. The NWS did not issue a new warning for Warren County until 7:45 p.m., 10 minutes after the debris signature was detected. The delay was due to the NWS's warning policy. NWS meteorologists do not issue a warning based on radar alone unless they are certain the rotation is reaching the ground. Debris signatures are strong indicators, but they can also be caused by blowing dust or large hail. The meteorologists wanted to confirm the debris with a spotter report. That report came at 7:43 p.m. from a trained spotter near the Warren County line. 2 minutes later, the warning was issued. By then, the tornado was 2 miles from the first residential area of Bowling Green. After the tornado, the National Weather Service conducted a service assessment of the December 10th outbreak. The report was published in February 2020. It found that the NWS had performed within its own standards for warning lead time. The average lead time for the entire outbreak was 17 minutes. But the report also noted that the NWS could consider issuing warnings earlier when radar shows strong evidence of debris, even without an immediate spotter confirmation. The report recommended that the NWS develop automated algorithms to detect debris signatures and issue warnings automatically. That recommendation has not yet been fully implemented. The Warren County Emergency Management Agency also conducted an internal review. The review found that the siren activation time of 7:48 p.m. was appropriate given the time of the warning, but it also found that the siren coverage was insufficient for mobile home parks on the western edge of the city. The review recommended replacing the existing 16 sirens with a new system of 40 sirens with better distribution. That recommendation was implemented in 2020. The review also identified a failure in the notification chain to mobile home parks. The Emergency Management Office did not have a list of mobile home park managers with direct contact information. The county had a database of commercial properties, but it was not sorted by housing type. The park manager for Briarwood was not in the database. The review recommended that all mobile home park managers be registered with the county and provided with direct emergency contact numbers. That recommendation was implemented by March 2020. But even with these changes, the question of what more could have been done remains. The answer involves not only the warning system, but also the nature of mobile home parks themselves. Mobile homes are inherently vulnerable to tornadoes. They offer little to no protection against winds above 100 miles per hour. The only safe option is to leave the mobile home and go to a sturdy building or a storm shelter. But in the Briarwood Park, there was no community storm shelter. The nearest safe building was a gas station a quarter-mile away. That gas station was also hit by the tornado and was destroyed. The residents of Briarwood were predominantly low income. Many did not own cars, some were elderly, some had disabilities. When the tornado warning was issued, they had to decide whether to stay in their mobile homes or try to leave. Leaving meant walking or driving to a shelter they were not sure existed. Staying meant hoping the tornado would miss them. The research on tornado behavior in mobile homes shows that people often underestimate the risk. The repeated false alarms in the past may have contributed to complacency. The storm had been forecast for days, but many people thought it would not be as severe as predicted. The night of December 10, 2021, changed that perception for Bowling Green. In the years since, the city has seen a surge in requests for building permits for in-ground storm shelters. The city has also worked with the state to provide free weather radios to low-income households. The radios are programmed to automatically activate when a tornado warning is issued. By the end of 2023, over 5,000 radios had been distributed in Warren County. The broader scientific community continues to study the December 10th outbreak. Meteorologists at the University of Alabama at Huntsville published a paper in 2024 analyzing the radar data from the storm. They found that the tornado that hit Bowling Green had a multiple vortex structure, with at least 3 separate funnels rotating around a common center. This structure is rare and extremely destructive. The multiple vortices can cause damage in a wider swath and make the tornado unpredictable. The paper suggested that future warning systems should account for multiple vortex tornadoes by issuing tornado emergencies earlier when radar shows signs of multiple vortices. The human consequences of the Bowling Green tornado are not limited to the 16 people who died. There were also 133 people injured. Many of those injuries were severe: broken bones, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injuries. The survivors faced long recoveries. Some lost their jobs because their workplaces were destroyed. Some lost their homes and had to live in temporary housing for months. The mental health toll was significant. The Warren County Health Department reported a 200% increase in calls to the crisis hotline in the 3 months after the tornado. The department launched a program providing free counseling for tornado survivors. That program ran for 18 months and served over 1,000 people. The economic impact was also substantial. The total damage to property in Warren County was estimated at $150 million. Of that, only $60 million was covered by insurance. Many low-income families had no insurance. Some had renter's insurance, but it rarely covered wind damage to personal property. The Federal Emergency Management Agency provided assistance to over 3,000 households, but the average payout was only $3,000. That was not enough to replace a mobile home, which typically costs between $50,000 and $80,000. The city of Bowling Green faced a housing crisis after the disaster. The tornado destroyed 450 mobile homes and 180 site-built homes that left over 2,000 people without permanent housing. The city opened a temporary shelter at the Bowling Green Recreation Center. It housed 200 people for the first week. After that, FEMA set up a temporary housing site with trailers at a former industrial park. But the trailers were not ready until February 2022, 2 months after the tornado. Many families stayed with relatives or in motels during that time. The disaster also exposed the racial and economic disparities in disaster response. The Briarwood Mobile Home Park had a population that was 60% white and 40% African American. The African American residents were more likely to have no insurance and less likely to have access to a car. After the tornado, they faced greater difficulty finding new housing because of discrimination and higher rents. The City Council acknowledged this issue in a 2023 report and committed to providing equal access to disaster recovery resources. The story of the Bowling Green tornado is not over. The city continues to implement new safety measures. The County Emergency Management Office now conducts yearly tornado drills in mobile home parks. The drills include sirens, phone notifications, and practice evacuation to nearby shelters. The drills are mandatory for all mobile home parks in the county. In 2025, a new emergency operations center was opened in Bowling Green. It is designed to withstand winds of up to 200 miles per hour and has backup power for 72 hours. The memory of the night of December 10, 2021 remains vivid for the survivors. One survivor, a woman named Sarah, lived in Briarwood with her 2 young children. She had no car and no cell phone. She heard the tornado warning on a battery-powered radio at 7:50 p.m. She did not know where to go. She ran to a neighbor's mobile home, but the neighbor had already left. She tried to walk to the gas station, but the wind was too strong. She turned back and took shelter in her bathroom, covering her children with a mattress. The tornado ripped the roof off her mobile home. The walls collapsed. She and her children survived because the bathtub was anchored to the concrete slab. The mattress absorbed the debris. They were rescued by emergency workers 2 hours later. Another survivor, a man named James, lived in a site-built home on Lovers Lane. He was a retired veteran and had a strong sense of weather awareness. He had a weather radio. He heard the warning at 7:47 p.m. He immediately went to his basement. The tornado destroyed the second floor of his house, but the basement was intact. He lost everything he owned above ground, but he was alive. He later said the warning saved his life. The difference between Sarah and James was not luck. It was access to information and shelter. Sarah had no weather radio, no cell phone, no car, no basement, no neighbor to help. James had all of those things. The challenge for disaster preparedness is to bridge that gap. The Bowling Green tornado showed that while the warning system was technically adequate, it was not equitable. The people most at risk were the least able to respond. Since the tornado, the National Weather Service has worked to improve its communication with vulnerable populations. In 2023, the NWS launched a pilot program called Text to Action, which sends simple, direct messages to cell phones in 18 languages. The messages are designed to be understood by people with limited English proficiency. The pilot was first tested in areas with high mobile home occupancy, including Warren County. Early results show an increase in shelter-seeking behavior. The broader question of climate change remains. The December 10th outbreak was fueled by unusually warm Gulf of Mexico waters. In 2024, a study by the University of Tennessee projected that winter tornado outbreaks will become more frequent and more intense in the coming decades. The study found that the average wind speed of tornadoes in December has increased by 15% since 1980. The number of tornadoes per outbreak has also increased. The study recommended that communities in the southeastern United States invest in tornado-resistant infrastructure, including safe rooms and reinforced roof trusses. But building codes are local. The state of Kentucky does not have a statewide building code that applies to mobile homes. Mobile homes are regulated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which sets minimum wind resistance standards. The HUD standards require mobile homes to withstand winds of up to 100 miles per hour, but that is not enough for an EF3 tornado with winds of 150 miles per hour. After the Bowling Green disaster, some states, including Kentucky, began considering requiring mobile homes in tornado-prone areas to be built with additional anchoring and strapping systems. But the mobile home industry has pushed back, arguing that the cost would make housing unaffordable. The debate over cost versus safety continues. In Bowling Green, the families of the 16 victims have become advocates for stricter mobile home standards. They petitioned the state legislature in 2003. A bill was introduced that would require all new mobile homes in Kentucky to include a built-in safe room. The bill failed to pass after opposition from the manufactured housing industry. A compromise bill passed in 2024 that requires mobile home parks to have a community safe room within a quarter mile. That requirement will take effect in 2026. The tornado also changed the way the city of Bowling Green communicates with its residents. The city now uses a social media platform to send emergency alerts. The platform allows residents to choose their preferred language and method of receipt, including text, email, or voice call. The city also installed digital message boards at major intersections that display weather alerts. The message boards were activated in 2023 and have been used for several severe weather events since. The lessons of the Bowling Green tornado are not only for that city. They are for every community that has mobile home parks, that has limited warning coverage, that has residents who may not have a car or a basement. The disaster showed that a warning issued is not the same as a warning received. And a warning received is not the same as a warning heeded. The gap between the warning and the action is where people die. The National Weather Service has a saying, the most important part of a tornado warning is the last 4 feet. That is the distance between the ears and the brain of the person who receives it. The warning must be understood and believed. In Bowling Green, many people understood. They heard the sirens, they saw the alerts, but they did not believe the tornado would hit them. It was a December night. It had been raining for hours. The tornado that hit Briarwood was the 5th tornado in Kentucky that evening. People thought the worst was over, but the worst was not over. The worst was still on the ground. It was moving at 60 miles per hour. It was producing winds of 150 miles per hour. It was destroying everything in its path, and it stopped at nothing. The tornado did not care about the debates over sirens or the missing phone numbers or the inadequate building codes. It simply did what nature does. It applied force to weakness. The survivors of the Bowling Green tornado know this better than anyone. They have rebuilt their homes, their lives, their community, but they have not forgotten the sound, the roar that shook the ground, the silence that followed. The question that still echoes, what more could have been done? Maybe nothing, maybe everything. The answer depends on who you ask. The meteorologist will say the warning was adequate. The city official will say the sirens were activated. The resident will say they never heard a sound. The park manager will say no one called. The truth is that the system was not broken. It was simply incomplete, and it still is. Every tornado season brings new warnings. Every new warning is an opportunity to save lives, but only if the warning reaches the people who need it and compels them to act. In Bowling Green on the night of December 10th, 2021, the warning reached some. It compelled some, but not all, and that is why the question remains. At 6:48 a.m. on December 11th, 2021, the first damage survey teams from the National Weather Service office in Louisville began driving south toward Bowling Green. They had been awake all night. Radar data showed a debris signature over Warren County. The preliminary information was fragmentary. The teams expected damage. They did not expect what they found. By 8:30 a.m., the survey teams had reached the Briarwood area. They saw rows of mobile homes flattened, twisted, and scattered across fields. Some frames had been lifted and thrown hundreds of feet. Trees were debarked. Vehicles were overturned. The team leader, a meteorologist named John, later described the scene as something he had only seen in Joplin or more. He had surveyed tornadoes for 15 years. This was different. The damage was concentrated, violent, and uniform. Almost every structure in the path was destroyed. The survey took 3 days. By the end, the team had mapped a continuous damage path 22 miles long. The tornado had touched down in northeastern Logan County at 7:49 p.m. It moved northeast through Warren County, crossing Interstate 65, and lifting near the Warren-Allen County line at 8:21 p.m. The path width varied from 300 yards to nearly half a mile. The maximum wind speed was estimated at 150 miles per hour, placing the tornado at the high end of EF3. That was the official rating, but for the residents the rating did not matter. The result was the same. What happened in those 32 minutes on the ground? The tornado was produced by a supercell thunderstorm that had already generated multiple tornadoes across Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and Illinois earlier that evening. That storm, known as the Mayfield Storm, had produced the devastating EF4 tornado that destroyed the town of Mayfield, Kentucky, around 9:30 p.m. Central Time. But the Bowling Green cell was separate. It formed along the same cold front, but it tracked slightly east. By the time it reached Warren County, the environment was extremely unstable. The combination of warm, moist air from the Gulf, strong wind shear, and a lifting mechanism from the front created a favorable setup. The storm intensified quickly. The first visual confirmation of the Bowling Green tornado came from a trained storm spotter in Auburn, a small town in Logan County. At 7:47 p.m., the spotter reported a large, rain-wrapped tornado on the ground moving northeast. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for northeastern Logan County and southwestern Warren County at 7:48 p.m. That warning included the Briarwood area. The warning stated, "This is a dangerous and life-threatening situation. Seek shelter immediately." But the warning was based on radar. The radar signature showed a powerful mesocyclone, but the tornado itself was difficult to see because of rain wrapping. Some residents did not see the tornado until it was on top of them. The first impact in Bowling Green was at the Cedar Springs Mobile Home Park just south of the city limits. At 7:52 p.m., the tornado struck the park with winds of 140 miles per hour. 40 mobile homes were destroyed. 20 were severely damaged. The park had no community safe room. The residents had received the warning, but many did not know where to go. Some ran to the park office, which was a wooden structure that collapsed. Others sheltered in their bathtubs. 2 people died in that park. One survivor, a man named David, lived at Cedar Springs with his wife. He heard the warning on his phone. He and his wife went to the interior hallway of their mobile home. They held each other. The tornado ripped the roof off. The walls gave way. David was thrown 20 feet. His wife was pinned under the refrigerator. He dug her out with his bare hands. They both survived. He later said the warning gave them 30 seconds. 30 seconds to decide where to go, how to hold on, what to leave behind. 30 seconds is not much time when you have nowhere safe to go. At 7:55 p.m., the tornado crossed Interstate 65. It struck the Pilot Travel Center on the east side of the highway. The truck stop had a concrete restroom that served as a shelter for several people. 3 people were seriously injured by flying glass. 1 died. Then the tornado moved into the Briarwood Mobile Home Park. Briarwood was the deadliest location. The park had 150 homes. 70 were destroyed. The tornado hit at 7:57 p.m. The majority of the homes were older models, built in the 1990s. They were anchored with straps, but the straps were designed for winds of 90 miles per hour. When the winds reached 150 miles per hour, the straps snapped. Homes were lifted, rolled, and torn apart. The response from emergency services began almost immediately after the tornado passed. At 8:05 p.m., the Bowling Green Police Department began receiving calls from residents reporting severe damage. At 8:10 p.m., the fire department dispatched units to Briarwood. At 8:12 p.m., the first rescue team arrived. They found a landscape of ruin. Mobile homes were stacked on top of each other. Cars were overturned. Trees were snapped. There was no power, there was no cell service. The only light came from flashlights and the occasional fire. Rescue operations continued through the night. The priority was to find survivors. Search and rescue teams from across Warren County responded. Volunteers arrived with chainsaws and pry bars. By 2 a.m. on December 11th, all 16 victims had been recovered. The oldest was 83. The youngest was 5. They were found in bedrooms, hallways, bathtubs. 9 were in Briarwood. 3 were in Cedar Springs. 2 were in the truck stop. 1 was in a site-built home on Lovers Lane. 1 was in a car on Interstate 6 Fairview. The medical examiner later determined that all 16 died from blunt force trauma. None died from drowning or suffocation. The injuries were consistent with being struck by debris or crushed by collapsing structures. The official cause of death was recorded as tornadic force winds, but the death toll did not capture the full human cost. In the weeks and months after the tornado, the survivors faced a different kind of destruction: the loss of homes, belongings, pets, memories, the displacement. The trauma. In the months following the disaster, mental health counselors reported a spike in cases of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety in Warren County. A survey conducted by the Kentucky Department of Public Health in 2022 found that 23% of adults in the affected areas reported symptoms of severe psychological distress, nearly double the statewide average. Children were especially affected. In the months after the tornado, school counselors in the Bowling Green Independent School District reported a significant increase in behavioral issues, including aggression, withdrawal, and difficulty concentrating. The district implemented a program called Trauma-Informed Schools to help teachers recognize signs of distress and provide support. The program was funded by a federal grant. It was the first of its kind in Kentucky. The disaster also tested the resilience of the community's infrastructure. For weeks after the tornado, parts of Bowling Green were without power, water, or internet. The city opened a temporary shelter at the Bowling Green Community Center. The shelter housed 130 people at its peak. Volunteers from across the state arrived to help. Donations poured in, but the recovery was uneven. Many survivors did not have insurance. Mobile home insurance is not required by law in Kentucky. Of the homes destroyed in Briarwood, only 15% had insurance policies that covered total loss. The rest were uninsured or underinsured. Some survivors had to rely on FEMA assistance, which provided up to $34,000 per household. But that was not enough to replace a home, a car, and a lifetime of belongings. The cost of the damage was estimated at over $100 million. That included the cost of replacing mobile homes, repairing infrastructure, and paying for debris removal. The city spent $6 million just to clear the debris from Briarwood. The debris was taken to a landfill 40 miles away. It filled 120 dump trucks. In April 2022, 4 months after the storm, the city of Bowling Green adopted a new planning ordinance for mobile home parks. The ordinance required that any new or expanded mobile home park must have at least one community safe room, a concrete shelter capable of holding all residents of the park. The safe room had to be within 500 feet of every home. The ordinance also required that all new mobile homes be built to HUD standards for Wind Zone 3, which means they can withstand winds of up to 110 miles per hour. Existing parks were given a compliance period of 7 years. But the ordinance only applied to new development. The existing parks, including Briarwood and Cedar Springs, remained without safe rooms. The owners argued that the cost of retrofitting was too high. In 2023, the state legislature passed a law that allowed mobile home park owners to apply for tax credits to build safe rooms. But the credits were limited. Only 10 parks in the state applied in the first year. None were in Warren County. The question of why more was not done is a question about resources. The city of Bowling Green did not have the funding to build safe rooms in every park. The county did not have the legal authority to mandate retrofits. The federal government provided assistance, but it was slow and limited. The system was not designed to respond to the speed of a tornado, and the tornado was fast. The Bowling Green tornado traveled at a forward speed of 60 miles per hour. That is faster than most tornadoes. Most tornadoes in the south move at 40 to 50 miles per hour. The rapid motion meant that the warning time was even shorter. Residents had on average 13 minutes between the issuance of the warning and the arrival of the tornado. In Briarwood, the lead time was only 10 minutes. 10 minutes to understand the threat, decide what to do, and execute a plan. For many, 10 minutes was not enough. The tornado also moved a long distance across multiple jurisdictions. It passed through several counties, each with its own emergency management system. The coordination was a challenge. The National Weather Service issued the warning, but local authorities were responsible for activating sirens. In some counties, the sirens were activated. In others, they were not. In Logan County, the sheriff's office activated the sirens. In Warren County, the city of Bowling Green activated its sirens, but the county's rural areas did not have sirens at all. The result was an uneven response. The experience of Bowling Green has become a case study in disaster preparedness. Researchers at the University of Kentucky have used the event to study the effectiveness of different types of warnings. Their findings, published in 2023, showed that the most effective warnings are those that include both a specific location and a specific instruction. For example, take shelter immediately in a basement or interior room was more likely to prompt action than seek shelter. The study also found that warnings that mention the severity of the storm, such as "this tornado will be devastating," increased compliance. But knowing what works and implementing it are two different things. The National Weather Service has adopted some of these findings in its new warning messages, but the warnings still rely on dissemination through the media, cell phones, and sirens. In Bowling Green, the sirens worked. The wireless emergency alert worked. The broadcast television warnings worked. But the people most at risk, those in mobile homes without basements, often lacked the means to see or hear those warnings. The problem is not just about technology, it is about trust. In the months after the tornado, researchers from the University of Alabama conducted surveys of survivors. They found that many did not believe the tornado would hit them. They had heard tornado warnings before many times. They had always been safe. The false alarm rate for tornado warnings in the South is high. Many warnings are issued for storms that do not produce tornadoes. Over time, people become desensitized. They stop responding. In Bowling Green, the false alarm problem was acute. The city had experienced 5 tornado warnings in the previous month. None had produced a tornado. When the warning came on December 10th, some people thought it was another false alarm. The challenge of false alarms is a challenge for meteorology. The National Weather Service issues warnings to avoid false negatives, that is, missing a tornado. The trade-off is false positives. In 2022, the agency launched a new initiative to reduce false alarms by incorporating high-resolution radar data and artificial intelligence models. The goal is to increase the accuracy of warnings to 90%, but accuracy does not guarantee action. The most important lesson from the Bowling Green tornado is that disaster preparedness is a shared responsibility. The government issues the warning, the media broadcasts it, the public must act. But the public can only act if they have the means to act. That means having a plan, having a safe place, having access to information. In Bowling Green, many people had none of those things. 16 lives were lost. Many more were changed forever. The tornado did not happen in a vacuum. It happened because of a unique combination of atmospheric conditions. It happened because of the built environment. It happened because of a warning system that was good but not great. It happened because of poverty and vulnerability. The story is not just about a storm. It is about the choices that communities make before the storm. Those choices are still being made. In Bowling Green, the city has continued to invest in safe rooms. In 2024, it opened a community safe room in the Briarwood neighborhood at the intersection of Lovers Lane and Campbell Lane. The safe room can hold up to 300 people. It is made of steel-reinforced concrete. It has backup power and ventilation. It is free to use. It is open anytime a tornado warning is issued. The project cost $1.2 million. It was funded by a federal grant and city funds, but the safe room can only help those who can get to it. The tornado struck on a Friday night. Many people were at home, many did not have a car, some were elderly, some were disabled. For them, the safe room might as well have been in another town. The question of access remains. In the end, the answer to the question, what more could have been done, is not simple. It is a list of things: better building codes, more safe rooms, shorter warning lead times, more accurate warnings, better trust, more equity. Each item is a piece of a puzzle that has not yet been completed. The puzzle is the same for every community that faces tornadoes. The pieces are expensive. The pieces take time, but the cost of not completing the puzzle is measured in lives. The residents of Bowling Green know that cost. They live with it every day. They see the empty lots where homes once stood. They hear the sirens on stormy nights. They remember the sound that does not fade, and that is why the question remains.